Happy to see you all. Good morning, everyone. Afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Yeah. Good, Mary. Thank you, sweetheart. And good morning, Anna, in Liverpool. Happy to see you, darling. Good. Okay. Hello, Shankar. Good morning, Shankar.
Hi there, Venerable. We have some prayers before we start.
This is good. Wonderful. That's right. Perfect start. So, yeah. So Shankar, you go. Okay, let's have a look what you're
Well, we'll do the
wonderful.
short
Okay,
mandala.
everybody, think this. Shankar's going to, on behalf of as our spiritual program coordinator, Shankar is going to offer a mandala. What this means is, the words say, this is actually the according to Buddhist cosmology, this is the view of the universe, and basically the mandala, is where is your abode. So you see all those round drawings, those rounds, those circular drawings we call mandalas. That's from Tantra, and they're just architectural drawings of the abodes of the Buddhas. So this abode here is our abode, is the world we live in. Well, of course, this is according to Buddhist cosmology, and it's we've got a blue sky. You didn't know this, did you? You didn't learn this in geography, whatever it is, astronomy. That we've got a blue sky because it's reflecting off lapis lazuli. Guess what? It's a very nice view, isn't it? So anyway, and the center of our universe is Mount Meru, it says here. And we've got 4 continents and the sun and the moon. So if we don't know all that one, we just visualize all the marvelous things. Use your creative imagination. Think of all the wonderful things of this world, the objects of all the senses that make people happy. And you pile them up as big as you can. The bigger, the better, Rinpoche says. And then you imagine offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. It's got this marvelous meaning. It's like paying for your ticket to go to the movies or the football, except you're offering the universe. So that's what we're doing. Think like that.
Okay. Saji poki juksing medo dramri rab lingji ni de gan padi sangye jingdo mikte ulwari namada jingla chupasho. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna
Mandala Kam. So we imagine now Buddha very happily receives our offering. Okay, so now I'm going to lead this one, as always, as I explained. This is sort of setting us in the right direction, really. The first 2 lines are reminding us, for those of us who already identify with being Buddhist, it reminds us of our reliance on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the second 2 lines are stating our motivation, as the Lamas would say. Well, we're stating our purpose, really. My lamp collapses. I've got a little television studio here. I've got a light shining on me, a light shining on the Buddha. Trying to make people look. Anyway, so then we're thinking we're going to listen to these teachings so that we can take some tools from it to help us develop our amazing potential so we can help others. Basically, that's it. Okay. Sangye chadang soke tog namla janchu baru dagni kyapsu chi. Dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penchir sange drupa shog. Sange charan soke chonam la janchu badu dagni kyapsu chi. Dagi chunyen gi personam ki drola penchir sange drupa shog. And I'll say it in English a bit more. So we're going until we're enlightened, it says, we're going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then by the virtuous karmic seeds that we pop into our bank vaults by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, no matter how long it takes, in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings, which is our potential. That's it. Thank you, people. So, okay, let's continue talking. Let's just carry on from yesterday, where we gave a kind of a really broad kind of overview, kind of trying to get a sense of the meaning of this law of karma. So basically, as I said, what can I do with this light? Nothing. Nothing at all. Except that's it. What to do. But basically this law, it's, really we look in the broadest way possible. Don't think of it as this small. When you hear it in a very simple way, if you do a bad action, it'll cause you to suffer. It's true, the essence of it, but let's get the big picture to get a sense of it, I mean, the really big picture is, I mentioned, I think yesterday, and often I think of this myself, but you look at the world over the centuries, there have been human beings with brains, human beings who can put two and two together. Of all the sentient beings, we can put two and two together in a more articulate way, can't we? Lions and dogs do a pretty good job in their own way, but we've got this common sense. We've got this ability to see things from a different point of view, which is really the saving grace about being human. So from the point of view of humans, as far as you can go back, even I think of always as the Australians quietly sitting there for 40,000 years, it seems, these Australian Aboriginals minding their own business, and they developed their own view of the universe, untouched by most other worlds, And so then, of course, the English people popped in and took over. And but their view, they call it dreamtime. I think I really try to understand it. It's quite abstract. It's quite fascinating. So what they've created, of course, we live in this planet. So we have we have conceptuality, humans. So we use it to interpret what we're seeing, don't we? Don't we? That's the point. So we're all of us over the centuries that, have got views, philosophies, this fancy Greek word for humans coming up with attitude, with opinions, viewpoints about how things exist. So you've got the kind of these days the three creator religions all coming from that little piece of earth called Israel. I mean, look at the dramas that go on there. The three different views all come from there. The Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims all come from that little spot, sort of roughly. And they've got similar views. They've got this concept of a source, isn't it? A source. There's an original source. The Christians call it a first cause, capital F, capital C. And they apparently have this detailed, intense analysis and philosophical discussion about how there can be a so-called first cause. Then you've got the Muslims. And then you've got the Hindus, which have been coming. Well, we hear about them before that, in this the Indian part of the world. Then you've got the Chinese part of the world. But of course, we arrogant white people, if that's what we are, tracking ourselves back through the European traditions, we get back to the Greeks, right? We think they're the ants pants, isn't it? We say the ants pants in America as well. We do. Okay, the ants pants. It's a ridiculous saying, isn't it? I bet it's come from the English though, the Cockneys. So anyway, there's these viewpoints, and what is philosophy? But it's a viewpoint about how things exist. So, it's like, and so of course we all get stuck in our own views. We think that these days the view that seems to prevail on the earth is the one that's the materialist philosophical view. And of course that thinks it's the best one since sliced bread. It thinks it's the one that knows reality, and all the other idiot views that call religion, they're stupid and foolish and nonsense, and we're the intelligent ones. But everybody thinks that way. If you go to any spot on the planet, that view is the view that you get brought up with it, so it's reality. Well, here we are looking at different views, and this is certainly what we're doing. We're learning about different views. So Buddhism came along, for us, let's say certainly in me in Australia, maybe in the 70s we first started to hear about it. It's probably there a bit before that. Lama Yeshe came to Australia, and then suddenly this big boom, as we know, from the hippies going to Kathmandu and bumping into the Tibetans. I mean, the hippies going into Kathmandu and looking for enlightenment and drugs. Why we saw them together, do not ask me. And so that coincided with the Tibetans leaving their country, So there's all this kind of interest in Buddhism now, especially certainly in Australia. It's very huge in Australia. From the numbers point of view, it's quite a big percentage. I mean, Australia's half the population of California, So here we are then, looking at and not just Buddhists in general. There's very, very versions of Buddhism. You got the Buddhism in Burma and Thailand, and you have the Buddhism in Japan and China, and you have the Buddhism in Tibet. They all have their source in India, which tracks itself back to Buddha 2,500 years ago. And he tracks himself back to these amazing genius Indians who, as the Dalai Lama said, were the ones who began the investigation to the nature of self, contrary to what we thought, Mr. Freud 100 years ago, how arrogant we are. So now we're learning about that, and especially in the West, more and more, especially since His Holiness the Dalai Lama is coming along, all these amazing conversations, and there's amazing things being published, more and more and more. People are, modern scientists and thinkers are seeing now the value, the incredible knowledge that's been in India all these years. But only now we're noticing, and it's been quite humbling because it's causing us to question our assumptions about reality, about what is consciousness, for example. When is life? Where is death? I mean, this is exactly what everybody asks about. So here we're looking at the Buddhist, specifically the Tibetan Buddhist, specifically through the lenses of Lama Tsongkhapa, the 14th century lineage Lama, who's our like patron saint, through the lenses of Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe, their FPMT organization. This is the framework of these discussions that we're having here, and I'm basing what I'm telling you on what I've studied with His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe, etc., etc., etc. And it's the views about reality. So the worldview of materialism is that, a human has got a brain. We're brilliant at understanding the brain. We're thinking we're discovering things we've never known before, which is probably true when it comes to neuroscience. We're learning about the universe, and we've got so the modern views of neuroscience, the modern views of psychology, psychotherapy, and psychiatry, and so on and so forth, are all based upon this view that a person is physical and their mind is their brain, and they're made by their mummy and daddy. Then you've got the Christian views and the Muslim views that yes, your mummy and daddy gives you a body, but God gives you a soul, and so then you're the creation of God, But now you've got the Buddhist view. Now, the Buddhist view is neither of these. This is the point. It's in many ways, a similarity. As Deborah said last night, there are so many similarities between Jesus and Buddha. It's true. But of course, as I said to her, I know I sound aggressive when I talk, as if I'm finding fault all the time. But all I'm doing is, if we want to learn about the Buddhist view, we have to learn to distinguish it from the other views. It's not criticizing. In the end, we take the views that we feel, whatever. We have to look into them. All I can do is look at the distinction. We have to be clear not what the similarities are. That's not going to be helpful to us. It's nice to hear that. And it's necessary for us to be harmonious. But here we're looking at the differences to try to be precise in understanding exactly what is this law of karma. So basically, it's the view of the universe as far as Buddha is concerned. It underpins everything. Many Buddhists love Lord Buddha, love the teachings on Buddha, love Buddhist teachings, love Buddhist practices, but haven't got a clue and are not interested in karma. I know a group of Buddhists who are like social worker Buddhists, and they do an amazing job helping people in a big city, but they don't even want to talk about karma. They feel embarrassed by it because it's so opposite. It's so opposite to the materialist view, even the Christians' views. But here we're discussing, I like the big picture. And for me, when I first heard the teachings from Lama Zopa, in Australia in 1976, when I was 31, 32, whatever I was, I know I didn't understand what he was saying most of the time. I knew the words, but I couldn't understand the concepts. But whenever time I heard this word karma, I remember saying, what is it? And someone said, oh, it's cause and effect. All I knew is I heard that. And I knew the piece had been missing in my life, So for me, one of the most powerful parts of being a Buddhist, and it's true, if you listen to the teachings of Lama Zopa, the classic Tibetan Buddhist teachings, karma is fundamental. If we can, so we have to understand if we want to be a Buddhist. It's not just some interesting belief that you can think of or not. You can be a 1% Buddhist. There's no problem. But here we're talking the 100% view, That's my interest. And it's the teachings. So the law of karma is such, and it's utterly linked to what the mind is. So we have to understand the mind, because the law of karma plays out in the minds and lives of all sentient beings. It's the law that governs basically the experiences of beings. That's this law. It's about the law. It's the law of cause and effect, specifically in relation, not to the law of cause and effect of botany, not the law of cause and effect of how to make a cake, not the law of cause and effect how to make a light, the law of cause and effect of how to get happy and how to stop suffering. That's it. How to stop suffering and how to get happy. How to stop suffering and how to get happy. That's the fundamentals of this law. And it's rooted in the understanding of the mind. So the mind for the Buddha, always, as I keep saying, repeat, we have to hear it again and again. It's a word that refers to, it's our consciousness. Our mind and our consciousness are synonymous. They're used synonymously, these two words, okay? So our mind is not physical. This is a fundamental point. As I say, if we can prove that Lord Buddha is wrong, if we can prove that our mind is the brain and that there is no such thing as something non-physical, if we can prove that, then perfect. Buddha's happy. He's made a mistake. He's happy to hear the truth. But if we can prove it to be true, the whole of Buddhism would collapse into a heap of incoherent nonsense, because all the views in Buddhism, all the Buddhist epistemology, all the Buddhist psychology, all the Buddhist metaphysics are all rooted in this view of mind being not physical, mind not being the handiwork of mummy, daddy, or a creator, mind not being a function of the brain. Yes, exists in dependence upon the brain. We'll discuss. Mind not coming out of nowhere, mind being a beginningless and an endless continuity of mental moments. That's the Mahayana view. That's the basis. That's the thing the fundamentals we have to understand. So the law of karma is the natural law that Buddha has observed with his noggin, with his intelligence. It is not revelation. It is not coming from on high. It is not merely a belief. It is not speculation. Buddha is a scientist, and I'm not being sarcastic when I say that. Whatever is Buddhism, whatever is valid Buddhism, and there's a lot of rubbish published purporting to be Buddhism, that's why we should check up carefully our sources, that what is valid Buddhism is necessarily the words that are coming from the direct experience of a person who has accomplished Buddhahood. And since the time of the Lord Buddha, there have been countless people who are working on and are achieving and have achieved what Buddha achieved. They followed his methodology. He says, this is what I found to be true. Here's my methodology. Over to you, baby. As I always tell the story of Nelson in New Zealand years ago, a question, I got a question that I've never had before or since. And actually it was a scientist. And he said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Which is a perfect question if you have the assumption that religion equals creator, which is our assumption in the world. Which is why when we hear Buddhism, we just dump it into the creator model, because that's what we think of as religion. So he was absolutely shocked. Everybody laughed and was shocked when I said, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings of relativity to him? Of course we would not, because we know immediately Einstein's a clever fellow who used his intelligence, who observed the world in front of him, what's right there, not in the sky, fantasy. No, what's there? He observed the reality of in front of him, and he identified the way things worked. He checked it out. He codified it as a series of laws and presented it. That is Lord Buddha. I'm sorry, no more and no less. That is Buddha. So if you can, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, if you practice Buddhism and you're moving along step by step, practicing, in the steps of the methodology, as he says, and you get to a point where you prove that Buddha's wrong, well, of course you must reject him. What else would you do? Of course you would. That's what he did. That's what he himself did when he went through the system as far as he could go in the genius Indian systems. And he got as far as he could go in relation to the findings about the nature of self. And he discovered that they got further to go. So he diverged in his own direction, which is why we have so-called Buddhism now. So it's up to us, That's why, as Lama says, we've got to squeeze our brains, not just sit there and believe. We're so deeply imbued with the view that somehow religion is belief. And that's correct if you're a Christian, because you can't prove that God is right. If you prove that God is right, that means you're God. So that is inappropriate. But you must prove what Buddha says is right. And then what happens? You become a Buddha. It's the potential of every one of us. And that potential exists in the mind. So as far as the Buddha is concerned, from his own direct observation, and the Indians before him observed this. And of course, which part of their mind did they observe? This is what we have to understand, the mind. When we say mind in the West, we mean up here, the bit that's related to the brain. We don't posit a subtle level. This is the thing that's crucial to understand. Buddhism asserts these subtle levels of cognition, which is the job of mind, which we can get when we've got this single point of concentration, this brilliant technique that the Indians invented 3,000 years ago. So this mind, then, the Buddha has observed that first of all, there are trillions and trillions upon countless trillions of mind possessors. I love this word. It's the translation of the Tibetan equivalent of what we translate as sentient being, the word sem chen, mind possessor. It's a perfect word. I wish we could use that better than sentient being, a mind possessor. It's amazing. So there are trillions of mind possessors. Humans are the tiniest percentage. For the Buddha, there's this whole spectrum. And to understand his laws of karma properly, we have to understand these different realms of existence, which we'll talk about this weekend. There are trillions of sentient beings. And you can divide them all. Okay, and their minds are not all necessarily not physical. Their minds are these mental continuums that track back each moment from this moment to the previous, like a chain of mental moments. Think of it like that. Not think of your mind as like this thing in the skull that you've got to pluck things out of. It's a continuity of mental moments, an unbroken chain of mental moments. And you get it back to the first second of conception. Then the egg goes to your mummy's body. The sperm goes to your daddy's body. Where does your consciousness come from? The previous moment. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. If you're a Christian, God puts a soul there and you track yourself back to God. If you're a materialist, you track yourself back to mummy, daddy, grandma, and the monkeys. Your body, yep, no problem, but not your mind, babies, not your tendencies, not your love and your hate and your psychosis and your generosity and your goodness. No, your consciousness is yours. This is the crucial point in Buddhism. It's so fundamentally necessary to understand this because it drives all of our understanding of what Buddhist practice is. That your consciousness is a continuity of itself. This moment comes from previous. And the physical world is exactly the same. I mean, in His Holiness, with all these discussions with the scientists, you know, they're trying to find the meaning of the universe, trying to find the first Big Bang, all this business, right? We're tracking back to the beginning. We've got to keep going back and back and back and back. That's why we have to look for the beginning of things. We want the beginning of things. Well, as His Holiness said, you know, he says the whole universe, this is the Vajrayana model. The universe is made of two things, consciousnesses and matter. That's it, basically. And what's matter? The four elements. Well, we used to talk like that back in the early days, you know, in the Western model. That's it. There's minds, trillions of consciousnesses, and matter. And that's the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. Now, this is what's fascinating. This is the Vajrayana model. Excuse me, sniffing perpetually in the Santa Fe allergy world. I live in a world of allergies. I've promised $10,000 to somebody, but I just found a good recipe. Somebody who's got a medicine from an allergy doctor. I haven't heard of it before. I have to tell you the name of it. You've got to get a script. I've got to try it out. I'm going to tell you if it works or not. He said it saved his life. What's the name of it? I'll let you know later. I asked my GP and my friend in North Carolina, the guy who runs our center there. He's my GP. And he didn't tell me this one, so it's a new one. And if you Santa Fe people know it, I'll have to get the name. I'll get you after the break. I'll tell you the name. Anyway, then I'll stop sniffing and apologizing for it. Where were we? Okay, minds. There are trillions and trillions of mind possessors. And then there is matter. And what is fascinating, and this is necessary to really understand how karma works, and the Vajrayana is very helpful, is it all, as His Holiness says, all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. Just have to kind of hear these words and try and imagine. You know, so our own minds are inextricably linked to our own set of the four elements. And as Lama Zopa says, you know, in the Kala Chakra Tantra, for example, there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. Internal is mind, external is the four elements. But here, even our own body, which is the external elements, this is external. Internal is mind. And so in Vajrayana, we've got the gross consciousness, which is our sensory consciousness. And clearly that is inextricably linked to this gross body, isn't it? But then we've got subtle consciousness, which we don't talk about in our models. And we've got, in that subtle level, we've got 72,000 subtle channels coursing through our body, the subtle nervous system. And then through those channels are coursing all these subtle wind energies, prana. It's the sort of the Chinese system, the Ayurvedic system, and certainly the Tibetan medical system, which is based on the Vajrayana. They study it for 12, 14 years, all these different wind energies. And all these different winds are connected to our different states of mind. Of course, this is not neuroscience. It's a different model, okay? A different language. So whatever your mind does, it programs your mind. We're going to get into the details of this is karma. Whatever your mind does, Buddha says, the natural law of karma is such that everything any being ever thinks, feels, does, says, every millisecond is a process of programming your consciousness. Nothing escapes. Nothing goes astray. So as Lama Zopa says, even just getting angry, for example, the mind being angry, that consciousness, which is inextricably linked to its own set of the four elements, that mind programs the mind in more anger, but also pollutes the wind energies, which eventually manifests karmically as sickness, and in turn, eventually, over a very long time, that impacts upon the external elements, which literally is what forms our environment. We'll go into all this. So it's a really fascinating explanation of the universe. The details are all in the texts. We're just giving the summary of things here, you know, the principles, basically. So as Holiness calls karma, self-creation. Every millisecond what we think and do and say programs our mind, impacts upon our elements, which in turn produces the body we get, which in turn produces the health or the lack of health, which in turn even produces the type of, you know, life we experience, and even the environment we experience. Everything is created by mind. We don't need a creator. There's no space for a creator. Buddha's not being rude and kind of chucked out a creator and sacked him and he hasn't got a job now. There is no such thing as a creator for the Buddha. He's not being rude. This is his observation. That's the radical difference. That's the radical difference between Buddhism and both the materialist views and the creative religions, is that we don't need a boss. You know, we don't need to be created by mummy and daddy. They give us a body. And even the body we create the cause to get that body. We'll talk about this. And there's no role for a creator. Buddha says it's a misconception. He's not being rude to all the millions of Christians and Muslims. His Holiness happily has conversations with all these different religions. He's really good at that. But it's not the Buddha's view, that's all. No, there's no place for creator. It's a misconception, he says. And equally, I mean, that's another discussion. Okay. So there are trillions and trillions of minds. So all these minds, you can divide them into two kinds. The Buddhas, the ones who perfected their minds, who are out of all the rubbish, delusion's gone, virtue perfected. The Buddhas and everybody else. Everybody else is divided into ordinary and superior. The superior ones, the Arya beings, have realized emptiness. Anybody who's realized emptiness on up to Buddhahood, they're the superior beings. The rest are ordinary. And then we're in samsara. We're in samsara. In samsara either refers to these different going from life to life in these different realms of existence, these different states of mind that are literally also connected to their own set of the four elements. And we'll describe these realms of existence. Or to be more direct, more personal, we can describe being in samsara as being caught up in all the delusions, which we're going to talk about, okay? So but the bottom line for karma is that every mind is beginningless. And this is a nuttiest thing for us. It seems to smash into kind of real confusion. But analyze it for a second. Let's look at this for a second. This is the Buddhist view. If we posit the law of cause and effect, and we do, scientists, that's the universe we live in. That's why we're so good at building buildings and making and gardens, because we understand the laws of cause and effect of engineering and mathematics and architecture and gardening and music. We're brilliant at this in our culture. We're brilliant at understanding the different laws of the physical world. That's our genius. That's our expertise, isn't it? So the thing is, this is the one about the Big Bang. And Holiness says the first Big Bang, no problem. No. Big Bang, no problem. Just not the first one, that's all, he says. So this is the thing. The Buddhist view is that basically matter and minds are beginningless. Now, this is the craziest view. We can't handle that emotionally. We are absolutely convinced there has to be a first cause. Think about it. We're even just psychologically, you go to your therapist. When did my suffering begin? When did the anger begin? When did the depression begin? And we track back with our therapist, don't we? We look into the past, like looking for a needle in a haystack, dying to find, aha, that's when it happened. That's when I started getting angry. That's when I started lying. We want a first cause. Now, why do we want that? If it's not rational, the Buddha says it's not rational. It's because we have ego grasping, the root delusion, that is in its nature dualistic, that then believes in things being causeless, believes in things unchanging, believes in things having no cause. This is where Buddha diverged from the Hindus. So you can't have a first moment by definition. Well, as I said, the Christians, capital F and capital C, they have detailed discussions apparently about how there can be a first cause. Because what is God? God is by definition causeless. But God is by definition always God, always has been and is. So in a sense is beginningless. So we kind of make that a very special quality. But the Buddha says everybody's beginningless. Whatever exists now, you cannot find. Why can't you find a first cause? It's not complicated. If you can track it back to 57 million years ago, there's the first moment of my mind. If you track back in a linear sense, the continuity of your mental moments, we're looking for the first cause. And you keep tracking back. Well, maybe it started then. Well, what if there was a moment of mind at that second? It has to have come from a previous moment. You have no other choice. As His Holiness said, you know, one of the things about cause and effect is that the substantial cause of something has to be something of a similar character. So if the mind is posited to be non-physical, then it's got to be the previous moment of that kind of continuity of non-physical energy that is its main cause. That is its main cause. There are many secondary causes, but the crucial main one. So then you keep tracking back that mind. Well, maybe it began that moment, even 50 million years ago. Well, then if it existed at that moment 50 million years ago, if it existed at that moment, it has to have had a previous cause. So how can you find anything that didn't have a previous cause? So as His Holiness says, mind and matter, they're beginningless. Big Bang, no problem, just not the first one. We've got to analyze, just think intellectually of that. So there are trillions of minds, and they are all beginningless, and they're endless. So there's never any more or less. We're circling, or we're going up and down, like we discussed last night, in different realms of existence, all based upon the actions we do, the karma we create. So the Buddha's saying, at the moment, we're kind of pretty much driven by delusions. This is what drives our actions of body and speech, which we're going to discuss. So he's so in the same way that you've got a garden that's full of weeds and flowers and you haven't got a clue about the law of botany, then it's a bit kind of hit and miss, isn't it? You wake up every morning nervous about what's going to be in the garden today. And it's like, that's how we live our lives, isn't it? We don't know why things happen. We have no idea. We really do believe that it's all good luck and bad luck. We really believe that as a scientific truth. I mean, it's so astonishing that we should think that. How ignorant can you be? Everything is coherent. So, of course, if you're a Christian, God knows everything. Perfect. And God has got a plan. God knows what he's doing. He made the damn universe. So he knows what he's doing. I think that's a great way to live your life. At least you can relax and accept that it's God's will. I mean, 99% of Christians, I bet you don't think that way. You rant and rave and blame God. But if there is a being who is perfect, and there is a being who's omniscient, and he is the creator of the universe, my goodness, I would have faith in him. Absolutely. Sit up and relax. He keeps his plan in his pocket. I don't care. He's got a plan. I'm happy to do his will. Look at the people who are devoted to God, It's amazing. I always quote this Muslim mummy and daddy in Malaysia years ago when one of the planes went down in the ocean. How do you feel about the death of your daughter? We are peaceful. She belongs to God. He has taken her back. How could you ever criticize that view? I mean, because look at the point is why? Because look at the consequence. They're happy. Good Lord, I'd be happy too if that's the view, but that ain't the Buddha's view, that's all. Buddha says we can learn the laws that run the universe because guess what? We are creating them every day. No, we're not creating the laws. We're creating the happiness and suffering, just that we haven't learned the law. In other words, you've never heard of botany. You've got a bunch of seeds and you don't know the difference between a bad seed and a good seed, and you're chucking them in the ground every day, and you have no sense that these things you're chucking in the ground every day are what causes the trees and the weeds in the future. That's how demented we are. They say the bodhisattvas have such compassion for sentient beings, not even because of the ignorance of ego grasping, but because of the ignorance of no cause and effect. We don't know that we ourselves sowed the seeds for this happiness we're experiencing now, and we ourselves sowed the seeds for our suffering now. That's the worst tormented nightmare of sentient beings, looking everywhere out there, and that is our view in the West. Not the West, the modern world. It is the view that happiness and suffering come from out there, and that the external world is the cause of everything. And Buddha says, it plays a role. He does not argue, but it's not the main role. We haven't got hit on the main role, he says, which is the mind. That's Buddha's view. That's his expertise. So, of course, in the very beginning, how can you prove this to be true? You can't prove that an acorn turns into an oak tree until you've studied botany. But you've got to start from the hypothesis, don't you, that an acorn is the cause of an oak tree, and then you learn the mechanics of it. Same here. So you check on Buddha to see if he's not some peanut, that he knows what he's talking about. You read the teachings. You listen to people who are practicing Buddhism. You look at the examples. I mean, if you look at people like the Dalai Lama, it's a pretty good example of Buddhism, I'd suggest, perhaps. You can check him out. 70 years of history. And you get some confidence, and you start to take it as your hypothesis, and you start learning. And then one way or the other, you either prove Buddha's right or you prove Buddha's wrong. That's it, babes. It's not belief. It's not belief. It's either true or it's not. We have to find out. So what's the consequence of this? Not just to fill our heads with a bunch of philosophy, how clever we are, The point in Buddhism, this is so amazing, I think, so important to understand. In our world, we don't see any relationship between wisdom and happiness or between wisdom and ethics. So you could argue absolutely that Buddhism is a method of how to get happy and stop suffering. It is a method of perfect ethics, of good ethics. And it is a method of how to stop ignorance and get happiness. And the point for the Buddhists is they all come together in one thing. But, I always say, you can be the best damn musician on the planet. You can be the best scientist on the planet. And you still go home and beat up your children and husband. That's a fact. We don't have any relationship between wisdom and ethics and happiness. That's the point for Buddhism. That should be a revelation for us. Because Buddha's saying, finally, why we suffer is because we are ignorant of cause and effect, and finally ignorant of how things exist ultimately, the intrinsic nature of things. So it's ignorance of reality, ignorance of how things are, that is why we suffer and why we practice wrong ethics. That's it. So by fixing our ethics first, junior school, we then look to the mind that drives our body and speech, our behavior, which is ethics, and then we can unpack and unravel the mind and understand how we create the universe, how we create our own happiness, how we create our own suffering, from life to life to life to life, that we are in charge, that we are the boss. I mean, this alone I find so delicious, you know. So it's up to us. That's what's implied by karma. It's not punishment and it's not reward, simply because in Buddhism there is no such concept as a punisher or rewarder. Because there's no creator. And so that's the trouble with this, because we've come from the view of, say, Christianity or Islam or Judaism, that most of us, let's say some creative religion, that assumes a boss and therefore a punisher and a rewarder. And as I always quote my Jesuit priest friend telling me when I asked him that a sin by definition, and what makes an action negative, hear this point, what is it that characterizes something as negative? For a Christian, it's because God said not to do it. That's so amazing when you hear that properly. And that, we don't analyze it, but that's what we assume. Oh, my mummy says I'm a naughty girl, I got caught. You know, I'm naughty because I didn't make my bed because mummy said. So, of course, in Buddhism, there are some ordinary laws that Buddha did create, like if monks and nuns living together or monks living together, there are certain rules you behave. But the fundamentals of how the universe is, that's natural law for the Buddha. There's no equivalent of God's law. We talk about God's law and we talk about natural law. No such thing in Buddhism. If it is only natural law. This is a hugely important point to understand. Okay, so if suffering is the fruit of things that I have thought and said and done in the past, my past programming, and that's not a complicated concept. You know, you are the fruit of your past programming when it comes to how you play piano. If you're a lousy piano player, it's because you've played piano wrongly. You haven't obeyed Bach's laws. It's pretty clear. So you're the producer of a bad musician, and you're the producer of a good musician. You're the boss, babe. Can't blame your piano. Can't blame the teacher. You can't even blame Bach. You're the one who made yourself a good musician or a bad one. Well, that's the same, the law for happiness and suffering for the Buddha. That's the point. That's the point. God, I'm just getting a note from T-Mobile. They're so wicked. I'm going to run out of GBs any second, which means I've got to find a different way to talk to you people. They're so wicked. They give you, for $50 a month, they give you unlimited data, but they suddenly tell me that if a 50 GBs run out before June 8th, which is another 2 weeks, it's going to go slow. So they're really liars. It's not even, you don't even get your $50 worth. They're very naughty, aren't they? So I've got to find a different method when we stop. I've got 2 more GBs to go. It won't take long. Okay, we'll see what happens. Okay. So I'm using my phone, you see. T-Mobile, $50 a month. Okay, so if what I've done and thought and said before brings suffering, and I know I don't want suffering, and if what I've done and said and think before brings happiness, and I want happiness, baby. Before we even analyze what happiness and suffering is, there are 3 levels of it. We'll discuss it. Then I'd better learn the law of botany, honey. I better learn Buddha's botany. I better learn what brings happiness and what brings suffering. It's so uncomplicated, but we hear it through the heavy duty dualistic thing of bad and good. Listen to our questions. Listen to our questions. It's always about, oh, you mean that child must have been naughty in the past? We can't bear the thought to think that a little child who looks innocent was a wicked person before. We can't bear to think that. That's fascinating that we can't think that, because we want to think everybody's innocent. We want animals and children to be innocent. They're the only ones, because they're the only ones we have compassion for. Think about it. A few animals, not the rats, not the cockroaches, just the pretty pussy wussies and the doggy woggies. We're so limited. Buddha says, sorry, mate. Every being in the universe, every Hitler, every dog, every monkey, every hell being, every spirit, every human, We are each second living out, expressing the past actions and creating new ones. So we better be in charge of the process so we can start to make sure we sow the right seeds. It's not complicated. We should be so happy that someone's got a damn law, that someone's found a method of how to ensure you get happy, but we resist it, thinking it's blame and how dare you say I'm the bad person. We can't bear it, you know. It's very fascinating. Okay, so then let's look at the Four Noble Truths first, though, and check out what is suffering. Because Buddha, again, got a very different analysis. 20 to 11, okay. Okay, so far so good. All right. So the Four Noble Truths, the four truths for the noble ones, is Buddha's first teaching after he got enlightened. He walked from Bodh Gaya to Varanasi and then to Sarnath, a place then called Deer Park. This lovely big place that was given by some king at the time, and all these, and so he bumped into his four previous disciples who'd given him up in disgust at some point because he'd given up being an ascetic, and then he became an enlightened being, and he met them again, and he finally gave his first teaching to them. He gave his first teaching. It was, of course, the Four Truths for the Noble Ones. So these are about suffering. There is suffering. 1, 2, there are causes. 3, you can get rid of suffering and its causes. 4, how to do it. It's pretty practical. So there's 3 levels of suffering. There's different ways of presenting, but the 3 levels is a good one. It really helps us understand what Buddha means by samsara for all the ordinary beings. So the first kind of suffering is what we all agree with is suffering, which is straightforward, which is the bad stuff. When the bad things happen, it's pretty straightforward. Lama Zopa, in his book of the prisoner's letters, you know, and I hope you get. It's such a brilliant book, actually. These teachings in Rinpoche's book are amazing. It's a really clear presentation of all the different, and the path to enlightenment, basically. And it's a book he asked me to put together all his letters to prisoners, and it's called How to Enjoy the Inner Prison. No, I always forget it. How to enjoy life liberated from the inner prison so that the outer prison doesn't become the real prison. That's the title. And you can get it by looking at the website, how to enjoy life liberated from the inner prison. How to enjoy life liberated from, forget it. I want you to get this book. You can offer whatever you like. Enjoy life. Is that what it's called? Yeah, enjoy life liberated from the inner prison.com. It's a fundraiser for the prison project. You can offer $1 for it, doesn't matter. You can get it. It's a wonderful book. It's brilliant, digital or paperback. It's really incredible teaching. All of Lama Zopa's teachings to these prisoners is amazing. Anyway, in there he calls it the suffering of pain, which is a good one. So when the first level of suffering, this is the thing, is the only one we think of as suffering. This is the framework of our entire lives. And that's when the bad thing, it's the simplest way to put what suffering is. You check it out. It's when the bad things happen. So of course that differs for different people. When some people get chocolate cake, that's disgusting, and that's called suffering because it makes them vomit. And when some people get chocolate cake, they're happy because it makes them happy. So that's called happiness for them. So we can see it's different for different people. But generally speaking, suffering is when the bad things happen, you know. The tiniest level of bad things to the most intense. That's all we think of as suffering. But Buddha's got a subtler, more nuanced level of understanding suffering, 2 more subtle levels. And this is what gives us real insight into Buddha's entire view of the universe. So the second kind of suffering is called the suffering of change. Which, shockingly enough, is what we mean by happiness. Very simple, which is when the good things happen. But for the Buddha, he's identified it's actually a subtler, more nuanced level of suffering. And that it takes us time which we don't even posit as a concept, I think, in our culture. That takes us time to understand. But the point about these 3 levels of suffering, if we look at the Lam Rim, this packaging of Buddha's teachings that the Tibetans are expert at, is all the teachings from all the Buddha's philosophy, psychology, epistemology, and the rest presented in an orderly way according to the capacity of the disciple. So the first level, which is the teachings and practices, as Rinpoche would call it, the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. And then you got the teachings and practices are suitable to the middle capability, and then the greatest capability. This is what I like to just cliched call junior school, high school, and university, because we get these concepts. It's levels of difficulty. We understand that. But here we're talking internal psychological levels. So that the teachings of the Buddha of the first level are all about the teachings of karma, which is about abiding, about good ethics. And that's related almost solely to your behavior, to the controlling your body and speech, to controlling the servants of your mind. And that is what causes, by living according to the laws of karma, which we're going to be discussing, that is the solution to the first kind of suffering. So in other words, if you don't want future suffering, and we're discussing two levels of when bad things happen, there's the lower realms, and then in a human life, even when the bad things happen. And I'll discuss these two. So if we don't want suffering, even if it's just the suffering of being lied to, stolen from, bad mouth, getting sick, we know we don't want that suffering. It's so instinctive. And Buddha says, well, hey guys, hey, I've got a method. Do you want to be harmed in the future? Lied to, stolen from, bad mouth, raped, terrorized, attacked? No, thank you. Well, here's your solution. Petal, stop causing it. It's not complicated. You don't want diabetes? Stop causing it. It's so uncomplicated. But we rant and rave and kick and scream and blame everybody else and look into with deep meaning. What is the meaning of life? Why is there suffering? God in heaven, excuse me. Buddha's got such a simple explanation. So whether we like it or not, whether we want to even look into it, So the first kind is junior school. You enter junior school, lower scope level, you abide by the laws of karma, you live in vows, and you purify. And we're going to discuss this. This is the solution to future suffering. You're going to die. You guarantee you get another decent human rebirth. You can guarantee you'll have a healthy body. You won't have negative tendencies. You won't have bad things happen to you. You'll live a long life and you'll be able to practice your path. How amazing. That's bare minimum. Buddha has solutions to that, explanations and solutions. But he says you can go further. You can start getting to the root of the problem when you get to high school, and now you look at the delusions that we're going to discuss that drive your actions of body and speech, that cause you to lie, steal, kill, etc. So at the second level, middle scope, high school, now we become our own therapist. Now we unpack and unravel our mind and look at the delusions, and by understanding the Buddhist model of the mind, which runs the universe. Or Buddha's model of the mind doesn't just refer to humans, it refers to all living beings. It's very amazing. We now start to become our own therapist and unpack and unravel our mind. And by doing this, we solve the problem of the second kind of suffering, which is the suffering of change, as we're going to describe. And then by the time we get to the Mahayana path, and we get to the six perfections of the Bodhisattva, and we get to the fifth and sixth perfections, we'll get single point of concentration, and the sixth perfection, we'll use it to cut the root of all suffering. And that's where we realize emptiness, and that's when we cut the all-pervasive suffering. The whole path is laid out of how to solve the problem of all the different levels of suffering. It's all coherent. Okay, so let's just stick to the grossest level of suffering. Let's forget about even the subtler levels. So if what I think and do and say produces 4 ways our karma ripens. 1, a suffering type of rebirth. And I'll discuss these now. Buddha asserts more than just humans. If I don't want a suffering rebirth, the first kind of way my karma ripens is a suffering rebirth. The second way my karma ripens is tendencies in my mind, even in a good rebirth. So, okay, in our case, due to past non-killing, we have got a human body. We won the lottery virtually. We didn't really. We actually worked hard at it. One of our non-killing virtuous karmic seeds practiced, no doubt, as Lama Zopa puts it, in the context of living in vows of non-killing. We're going to discuss the intensity of the power of vows, the necessity of living in vows, and also of the purification process, which we'll discuss, which is all the junior school level. But by having lived in vows of non-killing, we got the miracle of a human body. Our mind ran like a magnet to our mummy's fallopian tube, where it joined the egg and sperm of our mummy and daddy at the time of conception. We caused that by past non-killing. We'll discuss this. Second, in this life, the other 3 ways that karma ripens are also playing out. And that one is in the mind we've got. Mother Teresa and Hitler have got human bodies. Look at them, noses and arms and legs and brains. But when they open their mouths and when you see them do actions, that's when you can indicate what's in their mind. That's called tendencies similar to the cause. You get born, you get programmed. We came into this life programmed with our own tendencies. They are not from our mummy and daddy. They are not functions of genes and DNA and everything. Genes and DNA and the brain are physical indicators of what goes on in our mind. It's the best way to put it. So we come with our own tendencies. Hitler brought his own tendencies with him. His mummy, you can't blame his poor old Austrian housewife, mummy. Good Lord. And nor can you blame Mother Teresa's mummy for this little saint that she gave birth to. No. Although I did read recently in the New York Times, is the Mother Teresa a cult? Because all these ex-nuns that are criticizing because she was so strict and blah, 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 blah. So there you go, you see. Anyway, the next way our karma ripens in this life is called experiences similar to the cause. Now, look at us. We're super social beings, are we not? We live in the context of other beings, utterly interdependently. We rely upon a mother's body just to get a birth. Then we have daddies and siblings and aunties and rats and roaches in our lives. And then throughout our life, if you think about it very simply, we've either been harmed or helped by others. Well, that's called experiences similar to the cause. Whatever happens to you from the time you conceive till the time you die in relation to others, that's the kind of karma called experiences similar to the cause. All the good things that happen to you and all the bad things that happen to you, all the happiness that happens to you, all the suffering, these are the result of your own past actions. The body you get is the result of your own past actions. The mind you have and your tendencies are the result of your own past actions. And the fourth way karma ripens is in this life is the very physical world we occupy. We don't just float around in the sky. The four elements are configured in such a way, are they not, that they harm us or help us. You could live in a place that's beautiful, that's peaceful, that's got lovely, the elements behave nicely, the food is delicious, the water is good, the air is pure, there are no allergies coming down your nostrils. That's the fruit of your past virtue. Because your mind eventually is impacted upon the elements and configure them in such a way that they're harmonious with you. This is dependent arising. This is cause and effect. Everything is our own karmic appearance, as Lama Zopa says. So whatever you experience in terms of the physical world, including the beings, if you keep meeting mosquitoes that want your blood, if you keep meeting, like these days, other human beings who've got COVID-19, and by even breathing on you, they can cause you to die, that's environmental karma of past killing. If you have a person who doesn't believe your words, that's experience similar to the cause of your past lying. You can have your own tendency to lie. You don't know why. Mummy didn't teach you. It's because of your past lying. We are the product of our past, just like a musician is the product of their past, just like anybody is the product. It's a natural law of cause and effect. We produce ourselves moment by moment. So our past actions ripen in these four ways. So at the first level here, don't worry about subtler stuff. If I don't want future suffering rebirth, we'll discuss those in a minute. If I don't want negative tendencies, if I don't want bad things to happen to me, and I don't want a lousy environment, then don't cause it, Buddha says. Entry level, junior school, the most urgent level of practice, as Lama Zopa says, start right this second. Stop killing. The 7 little baby instructions Buddha gives. 7. Only 7. There must be 400 things you have to learn just to drive a damn car. This is just to be a better person. There's 7. There's 7. Nothing. We memorize all the things not to do to drive a good car, to be a good driver. I've got to live in rules. Buddha's giving me vows. Oh, my dear. Ridiculous. There's only 7 recommendations. Don't kill any living being. Start now. Don't take the ungiven, as the Tibetans put it. Don't jump on the wrong partner. Control your damn body. Control your attachment to sex. Don't cheat on other people. That's 3 of the body. Just 3, he recommends. At this first level, just 3 baby actions. And then the 4 of the speech, which is us humans, isn't it? Don't say words that aren't true. Don't abuse people. Don't be rude. I'm rude, I'm afraid. A restaurant I went to with Mary and Nancy a couple of days ago, the poor waiter blurted out, you're rude to everybody. What does he say? You're rude to everybody in this restaurant. I was so shocked, I was speechless. I could not believe it. I know I'm blunt, but I upset the poor waiter, so I've got to give him a box of chocolates and apologize now. But this is one of the karmas. I am blunt, I am rude. But even if one of the karmic results of abusive speech from past lives is that even when you're being nice, People think you're being abusive. And you can be forgiven for thinking I'm being abusive. I mean, I shout the whole time, isn't it? I mean, I'm astonished. If someone asked me to check up what I said and I listen to the tape of myself, I can't imagine how anybody hears it. I'm shouting constantly. That's why I've got soundproofing in my room. My door's soundproofed and my wall is soundproofed. I don't want to be shouting down the corridors, you know. I always say when I get really old, I might calm down, but I haven't yet. Anyway, never mind. So you don't abuse with your speech. You don't say untrue words. You don't abuse people with rough language. You don't talk bad things behind backs. That's the one we love best because we feel safe because the person's not there. The politicians aren't there. The next door neighbor's not there. Your mummy's not there. So we love to badmouth them behind their backs. And then the fourth one is don't just rabbit on about nothing. These are the 4 of speech. So these are the 7 little instructions. The last 3 of these list of 10 don'ts are the beginnings of working on your mind. I put it that way, you know. We'll discuss that in a minute. So this is Buddha's recommendations. It's not a rule yet. He's just recommending you go to the Buddha, the doctor called the Buddha. Can you please give me some advice about how to stop future suffering? Yeah, he told you these 7 things. It's not that complicated. So if you just did those 7, not even the last 3, just those 7, you know, you can guarantee that you'll have a happy life next life. Because what the next life is produced by you. You're the boss. No one determines it. No one runs it. There's no boss. There's no one pulling the strings. There's no creator. There's no punisher. There's no rewarder. It's a very shocking, scary concept initially because we'd rather blame somebody else, you know. We'd rather put it in somebody else's hands. Oh, I'm sure we even Buddhists would think, oh, I'm sure Lama Zopa sees I'm being a nice person. I'm sure I'll get a nice rebirth. No, people, it's up to you to decide. So this is the first level of practice. The essence of it is this. So if it is true, then a negative action will bring me future suffering and I don't want suffering, I'd better learn to know how to define a negative action. I'd better learn some botany, hadn't I? So let's analyze what are the components of an action that we do that make it a negative one, that cause it to drop a negative seed in our bank vault, that will cause it, unless we pull it out, to ripen as future suffering in any of those 4 ways. This is the logic we have to learn, you know. Okay. Okay, before I go into any details now, more details, it's been an hour. I think it's good if you ask some questions about only what I've discussed so far. I'm going to go into details now. I'm going to spell it all out. But are there any questions in general? And if they're not, that's really fine. Mary, are there any questions there? Anna?
It looks like Beth has a question.
Good, okay. Ask it, please. Does Beth want to ask it herself or are you going to ask it for Beth?
I'll just ask it. She put it in the chat.
Good, okay, please.
Is not getting bit by mosquitoes previous non-killing? This is
absolutely every second, Beth, that we are being treated nicely. Put it this way: every second you're not being beaten by a mosquito, you're not being raped, terrorized, lied to, stolen from. Every second is the fruit of not having done those things, thus having a reasonable life. Absolutely, it's conscious. It's from conscious, intentional past virtue that nice things happen. Absolutely. Because the absence of unnice things happening is usually then the presence of nice things happening. The air is pleasant on your body. We don't think of it usually. We just think, oh, it's so boring, you know. But the very fact that we're not being lied, stolen from, killed, harmed, abused, and look at the world. I mean, look at the lives of animals. Look at the lives of some humans. They are living in all these 3 levels of suffering, unbearably unable to escape it. No matter what happens, they're living in suffering. It's so unbearable. Life, you know, day after day. So it's a miracle, but we take it for granted, you know, oh, just boring, nice day. Look at it, it's a boring, nice day. Nothing exciting happening. It's like a miracle. It is the fruit of virtue. Absolutely, Beth. Yes. What next? Hillary's got a question.
Hi there.
Yes, Hillary.
Hello.
Can't hear you, Petal.
Yes.
Can't hear you, darling.
Oh, sorry.
You get a bit louder, please.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, thank you. So, regarding animals, how are they responsible for their karma if they're acting on instinct in terms of, you know, killing prey and eating it? That's their instinct.
I understand, darling. That's the tragedy of karma. The same with us. Forget animals. Look at how we have no control over that piece of cake. Look how you just have no control over getting depressed, no control about getting angry, no control about being lazy. Analyze us even. Do you understand what I'm getting at here, Hillary? Look at our tendencies. Look how we don't have much control. Would you agree with that about some things? Would you agree with that, Hillary, first?
Yes.
We seem to be running on instinct, aren't we? That's because we've done those actions that often that then we've got the results. It's equally the same with good. When you see how good it is, you know, a person who's perfect at piano, that's effortless by now. They just put their hands on the piano and the music comes out. So that's because they've consciously practiced playing the piano. Well, we must have consciously practiced lying and stealing and killing, or whatever it might be that we do instinctively, including the animals. That's the tragedy of karma. They're responsible because they created the course to run to that lion's womb in the first place, from having killed and lied and stolen. That's the tragedy. It's like, you know, it's not blame or punishment or reward. If you don't know botany, then you don't know the seeds you're planting, do you? And then you get the results, don't you, out of ignorance. This is the tragedy.
So then how does an animal ever get beyond the incarnation of?
But because the only way is that the negative seeds have to run out, and like a miracle, one of the good seeds in their mind, and they've got plenty of them, but they're buried at the moment, one of the good seeds has to be triggered. They can't do anything in an animal's life. There's no volition. They don't have much. I mean, some animals maybe, like, you know, domestic animals that are trained to help people. There's some virtue there. But most animals are just running on their autopilot on the instinctive negativities. And it's only when that runs out at a certain point and some virtuous karma pops up, like in a particular life, maybe your little doggy, you know, you say a mantra in your ear of your doggy at the time it's dying, and that'll trigger one of its virtuous karmic seeds and it'll get a human body. We've been animals in the past, so it indicates that you can, but you can't do much as an animal to change it. Whereas a human, at least we've got enough common sense to hopefully try and use our volition to make changes. That's the saving grace of being a human.
I see. And so mantras, we can help our animals with
Absolutely. There's masses of ways you can help your animals. I mean, there's this book of Lama Zopa's called How to Face Death Without Fear. And there's lots of different practices. And of course, this is contingent upon our understanding and having some confidence that practices like the Buddhas and mantras can be of benefit to other beings. Absolutely. Because the Buddhists, you would say, whatever we hear leaves an imprint in the mind. So if you say a mantra that's related to the Buddha of compassion, that leaves an imprint of that in the mind and a connection with the Buddha.
Mm.
Do you understand? Good, Hilary, thank you. What else is there? Kevin looks like he's got a question. What, Kevin? Talk to me, honey.
Thank you, Robina. So I can see how the thoughts that arise in my mind create my life.
Yes.
If I'm programmed, it seems as if some of these thoughts I kind of have coming to me based on past actions.
Yes.
How can I work with the thoughts that I only notice after the fact to disrupt some kind of inevitability?
I understand. It's it's learning about your mind, learning to concentrate in meditation so that we can start to get out of ourselves, and so we can start to observe at ever more subtle levels the workings of the mind, so that we can start at that level to begin to control it. Our tragedy is, Kevin, we only get to see what happens when it's out the mouth. You only get to see that you're depressed because you're inert in bed and can't move, because we don't notice what's going on in our mind tragically until it hits the body, and it's a bit late. So we have to learn to notice the mind before it gets to the emotional level, and that can only come from learning concentration meditation and learning these skills that we then bring to bear in our daily life, where we start to get this real awareness of what the name of God is happening in our mind before it comes out the mouth, before it becomes emotional. That's the great skill that Buddha offers us. Do you understand, Kevin? You've gone from my picture. Where are you?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
that you understand what I'm saying? Can you get what I'm getting at? So the techniques are there. We have to learn to become conscious, that's all. And naturally at an ever more subtle level. The same with anything. If you look at a garden, but you don't know botany, you can't see that much because you don't have the knowledge. But the more you learn the technicalities of botany, you see things ever more deeply, don't you? You see things ever more subtly. It's exactly the same with our mind, Kevin. That's Buddha's expertise.
So in meditation practice, sometimes the energy arises or develops from thought into emotion, and it can be felt in the body. If we're still able to hold our seat without hooking it up to our vocal cords, is that a purification of the emotional karma?
I didn't quite follow your thoughts, the words you use. Can you say it in another way, please?
Yes. So sometimes in awareness practice, we might be aware of thoughts, but sometimes even in meditation, those thoughts can take deeper root and become emotion while we're practicing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. It's very interesting that you should say deeper. Actually, the emotional level for the Buddha is more superficial, because that's the body. And our trouble is, because I think in our culture, Kevin, because we're so addicted to our body, as Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss. We only think we're the body. Our whole science is based only on the body. And so, of course, a lot of the views we have about people talking about becoming more aware of your body, that's a good step. Even the Buddha's one of his very first awareness teachings was to use concentration to watch the sensations of your body. Now, the reason he got us to do that is not to become aware of the body, but to notice impermanence, how things change. Because we are embodied, for some of us, our body is very powerful, and we can use it as a means to get into the mind, which is actually more subtle. So depending on which meditation you're doing, I can't get it from what you've just said, that, there are different kinds of meditations. But the concentration meditation, for example, is merely a technique where you are training your mind to stay on one thing and not to follow the thoughts. So the skill that comes from that we bring to bear in our daily life is that because you've stepped out of your head for 5 minutes and you're training yourself not to absorb into all the thoughts and get all carried away, which is how we spend our lives, the skill you bring to bear in your daily life from doing your concentration every day, which is stepping out of your head and just watching your breath, let's say, is that you then learn the skill that while you're doing the dishes and while you're talking to your mum, whereas once you would have only noticed what you're feeling when your body felt it, now you're observing the angry thoughts and the jealous thoughts while they're simmering beneath the feelings. That's when you got to get them and then argue with them and counteract them. That's what we have to learn to do. That's the great skill we have to learn to do. So we can learn to reconfigure, unpack and unravel and deconstruct and then reconstruct our thought processes into the mind of a Buddha. It's a hard job. But we're talking the mind here. The body's just an indicator. But we're very captivated by our physical experiences. And they can teach us, but don't be captivated by the body. I'm not saying you are, I'm just talking. You with me, Kevin? Good, good, good. And this is the hardest job we'll ever do because we don't pay. I always use the dumbest analogy, but it's such a good one. If you're driving 120 kilometers an hour on the freeway and you suddenly discover your wheels are falling off, that's how we think about our emotions, because you've never heard of car mechanics. You've never noticed the wheels wobbling until they're screaming and they're falling off. Oh, my wheels are falling off. A little bit late to notice. So the learning is go back to basics and start noticing the wheels when they wobble. And you can handle the wheels when they're wobbling, they'll never fall off. That's what we can learn. Forget about achieving nirvana. Forget about becoming a Buddha. We can learn to control, work with, understand our mind. It's amazing what Buddha's saying. You with me, Kevin? Good, 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 good. What else is there?
There's a question in chat from Matthew.
Yes, Matthew, talk to me.
I'll read it. It says, could you say something about karma in relation to waking and sleeping, and how sometimes when we are tired, our thoughts may tend to be more pessimistic?
Oh, that's interesting. That's your experience at least. Who is this Kevin, you said? Mary? Who is this person? What's her name?
Matthew. It's Matthew.
Oh, Matthew. Sorry, Matthew. Okay, Matthew. The second one, not everybody, maybe that's how you feel. That might be your mind, perhaps. That's okay, but I'll answer that in a second. But the first one now, I forget the first one. Sleeping and waking. Okay. Well, this is really, to understand a little bit this one, we need to understand again the Vajrayana model, which is actually it's the most advanced, but it's also very practical. It seems very simple in a way. It's very nice. The Vajrayana model asserts we've got gross consciousness, which is a sensory related to this gross body. And then we've got subtle consciousness. And that's our mental, that's our thoughts and feelings, and they're more subtle, actually. We see that we're in touch with them at the gross level, but they've got much subtler levels. And they're intimately connected to our subtle body, which is really made up of these subtle wind energies and this subtle nervous system. It's described in great detail in the Vajrayana system, and also it's the basis of the Tibetan medical system. So then, and it's a bit similar to the Chinese and the Indian, like I said before. And then you've even got very subtle consciousness. So now, the death process is described in great detail in this Vajrayana model, and it's a really important one to become understand in order to die properly, because at the time of the death, before we stop breathing, the karmic seed that will determine our next life is already triggered. So it's death, to die peacefully is really crucial. So this Lama Zopa's book goes into this in great detail, how to face death without fear. It's brilliant. Anyway, the mind at the gross level, we live at the gross level. We can see it's very limited, isn't it? I mean, we know we've got all these thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions. I mean, even in Western psychology, they talk about we've got 1,000 thoughts a second. But look, even now, for me, it's like 11. For you guys in in the mountain time, it's 11 a.m. Analyze. If you had to account, write down every tiny thought you've had, every tiny thing you've done and said in perfect order since you woke up this morning. We laugh at that even as a possibility, right? That proves the limitation of our cognition at a conceptual level. We don't remember 99.99% of what we think and do most of the time. And then we remember what we do remember, even in this part of just this life, are a few occasions. We remember a few occasions, and they're distorted anyway by our delusion. So we've got very limited capacity. But that would seem weird to us because we don't posit the possibility of doing anything else. But that's what Buddha says we can do. Even when we get single point of concentration, which is this incredibly sophisticated skill that these Indians invented before the Buddha, which is a living, real, extant technique right now being used by millions of people, or thousands of people at least. This is where we can access our subtle level of mind, our subtle level. So in general terms, the grosser level is when you're wide awake and wound up. Your subtle mind, you experience it in dreams. Or even when you're going slightly from the grosser level and moving towards sleep, you can sometimes you get visions and things, because that's your subtle mind. So your subtle mind, we're not in control of it. The greatest yogis can control their subtle mind. And the subtle mind, when we've really harnessed it and learned to access it, which is beyond the grosser level, that has much more power. That has the power to, because it's more subtle, that level of consciousness can cognize phenomena that are more subtle, such as the past and the future and the minds of others. This is what's called clairvoyance. It's not just some hippy-trippy thing that some people get occasionally. It's actually completely part of the Buddhist view of what the mind is capable of. And Buddha would say, we've had countless lifetimes. We've had single-pointed concentration, shamatha. We've had this capacity, but we've lost it. So that's just subtle mind. It's capable of this. It's much more powerful, and that's the dream mind. And we know from some people, when they dream, people have visions of the future. People see things from the past. They have clairvoyant experiences. Some people have out-of-body experiences. That's your subtle mind. So but we can train it. This is the greatest yogis in the Vajrayana system, completely can train the mind. And so the sleeping and waking. The sleeping is the subtle mind, and then you wake up occasionally in the middle of night, don't you? Dream. You wake up, if you like, to the dream mind, which is your subtle mind. So I hope that helps, Matthew. If you have questions, you ask me. Yeah? Useful? Good. Now, why you get a bit pessimistic when you get tired, that's an interesting point, Matthew, because other people mightn't say that. Maybe it's because you're less in control, and then the delusions that are already there just have the space to pop up, So it's all it do is indicating what's in your mind already, and you should be happy you see it, because then you can fix it. So I rejoice that you're seeing your pessimistic mind when you're sleeping. All right, now you can fix it, because it's not set in stone. Do you understand? Good. What else is there? Or shall I continue going into details? Mary?
Alana has a question.
Okay, Alana. Talk to me, Alana. Hello, sweetheart.
Hello, Venerable. Thank you for the teachings.
Good.
Nice to see you again.
Yes.
I have a question. My stepfather, he is quite ill, and he lives in Ukraine.
Yes.
He's not a Buddhist. My mom is not a Buddhist.
Sure.
But I have the book, How to Face Fear. And I read in the book, and I read through the chapters. I tried to find something to help, trigger positive seeds in his mind.
Yes.
In this book, a lot talks about how to help, but it means when you're close to people who die, to your loved ones.
Yes.
But I'm not close. I'm not there. So,
but is it what did you say? It's your mother's husband, right?
Yeah, they divorced, but she helps him anyway. She goes and helps him.
Are you saying it's your father? I'm sorry.
Stepfather.
Okay.
It's my stepfather.
Your stepfather? Are you close to this man?
No.
You don't have a phone conversations with him and talk to him? I need to know.
I don't.
Okay. All right.
But I have some karma with him, which I understand why happened, but things happen.
I understand. You mean some bad happened?
Yes, and I'm not angry. I know what I know how karma works.
Good.
So I'm not angry at him.
Good.
But he is dying, and I suspect he might go to low realms. don't know,
No,
but
okay, never mind that. So, darling, do you ever have a conversation with him? Or speak to him?
when I go there,
Only when you go there.
yes.
Is he sick at the moment? Is he called dying? The doctors call him dying?
He's sick. Mom said he is in a bad way. So I don't think
Okay.
doctors.
Okay, okay. I'm just asking questions. So is it
Yes.
something you would ever do? I mean, you do have a, would it be something you think would be beneficial for you to call him one time and just talk to him, or even write him a letter? Were you brought up by him? Was he?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe what you can do for helping his mind, darling, is if you feel ready, you can write him a letter. You can tell him how you love him. You can tell him you thank him for everything he did to you as a father, and you admire his good qualities, and you praise him and you love him. Does he have faith in God? Does he have faith in God?
He's materialist type.
He's never had faith in God. Okay, fine. You can praise his good qualities. You can thank him for everything he's done. That would be something very beneficial you can do for him. He will be amazed and delighted and will never forget it. And that will help his mind. Can you hear that?
I can tell him that. I can call him and tell him that.
But
I
why
don't
not
mind do that.
Because but it's maybe harder to see it, to hear it. He might see it in a letter written down. He'll read those words and be astonished. If he hears it, he might not hear it properly.
No, Robina, he is not. His mom said he's getting blind, so I know if
you can read it to him.
I can read it to him.
I think it's powerful to have it written down for him to hear it and to listen to it again. Most of us never hear praise. Most of us have guilt and shame and bury our misery. He has to know something in his mind about what he's done wrong in his life, but it's too hard for him to understand it. He can't forgive himself. So having something from you, he's not stupid, so powerful, written down. You send him some flowers, something physical, something written on a piece of paper, loving him, thanking him. He'll be so astonished and so moved. It will purify his heart. It will forgive him. It will loosen his heart. It will lift his mind. This is a gift you can give him. It's just a thought.
I will.
He will never hear, he won't even imagine these words coming from you. It will be a shock to him. It will be a shock to your mother. It will be amazing for both of them.
I will.
All right,
yes,
darling.
I will.
Good. You're very brave. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, people. What else? That's it, Mary. Yes. Okay. So why don't we now let's go into details about what is it that causes an action we do to be called negative, and thus to leave a seed in our negative bank vault, if you like, my analogy, that will then ripen as our suffering in the future. It's like botany. You've got to be precise, people. So let's be precise here. Well, there's so many factors involved in anything we do and say and think. Each of us is different. But we can narrow it down if there's going to be an action we do that's called a complete action, which is what will drop a seed into our main bank vault, which will then ripen as a type of rebirth, and then certain consequences in the other ways of karma ripening later. So in order for it to be a complete action, negative or positive, there need to be 4 things in place, roughly speaking. There's much more detail to it, but this is very broad, very general. So let's use a simple example of a conscious, intentional action of non-killing. You see, when we say non-killing, non-stealing, that's why that question before was so good. Is the fact that mosquitoes don't bite us, is that the fruit of a virtuous action? Yes, it is. It's not just lucky that you don't get bitten. It's not, when we say, oh, I'm not getting bitten by mosquitoes, it sounds like nothing's happening. But the fact that you don't get bitten and don't get lied to and don't get stolen from means that you have practiced the virtue of not killing and not stealing and not lying. So the result is merely that everything works beautifully, but we take it for granted. We don't think it's anything happening at all. But it's the fruit of virtue. It's incredible, of the virtue of not killing, not stealing, not lying. And they need to be intentional. Okay, so an action of not killing would, for it to be a complete one, would have 4 things in place. The first is obviously because killing is, you can see this from the first 7 actions that Buddha would suggest, first 7 things to refrain from that Buddha would suggest we do, are all related to harming a sentient being. They're the heaviest ones because they impact upon others. So the one of not killing has to imply a living being is the first of the 4 conditions that have to be in place. So that would be, for example, the mouse in your kitchen. The second one is the crucial one, which is your mind involved in this action. You'll see this is the most important. You can argue if your mind is not involved, then there is no karma. It is said that the word karma actually really, which is sort of said to be action. I think other people, I don't know, I don't speak Sanskrit, but it's, you know, the main word the main part of us that refers to is intention, mental action. I will. Intention is volition. It doesn't, we often use it to refer to being good motivation or bad intention or good intention. That's not the meaning here. It's bare bones volition. I will. It's fundamental. So the second thing to be in place is your mind involved in this action of non-killing. And there's 2 parts. There's more to it, but these are the 2 main ones. 2A is in bare bones intention. I will not kill the mouse. I must be careful not to kill the mouse. Something like that. It has to be there, conscious, intentional. But then the crucial piece that comes along so completely with that we think they're the same thing, but they're different parts of the mind. This is 2B. This is your motivation. In other words, why aren't you going to kill the mouse, Robina? Oh, compassion. The poor mouse might suffer. So intention and motivation come together so completely in most actions we do until we start to practice that they seem like the same thing. So let's just say a negative action of killing, exactly the same. Intention, I will kill the mouse. And it comes so quickly with the disgust, the motivation, disgusting mice. That's called aversion. But the intention, I will kill the mouse, itself, this is crucial to understand. Intention has no character to it. It's merely, I will do this. It doesn't have any flavor yet until the motivation kicks in. And they usually come in together, you know. I'm not sure which comes first, even. I don't know that. But think about it. So first, there has to be the mouse. Second, obviously there's the volition. Even there's a 3 pieces actually in the second one, which is the discrimination. You see it's that mouse. Then the intention, I will not kill the mouse. The third one, motivation, compassion. And that motivation colors the whole action. That takes over the whole flavor. I always remember when my mother used to make cakes and she'd put in this cochineal. It was pink, I think, pink coloring, isn't it, into the cake. And suddenly you put 1 drop into the icing. I always noticed it, the white icing. Suddenly the whole of the icing became pink. Well, that motivation's like that. It completely infuses, what's the word? I forget the word. Totally colors the whole action. It's the motivation that counts most. First, there has to be the intention. And then when there's the intention, it's the motivation. That's the factor that determines whether the action you do of saving the mouse is negative or positive. That's it. Not quite that's it, but that's it. The third is you do the action. You catch the mouse. The fourth is the mouse lives and you release it, you know. Thank you, Robina. Bye-bye. Happy mouse. Roughly speaking. Exactly the same for killing. 1, the object. 2, the intention. I will kill the mouse. Why? Aversion. Ugh, disgusting. 3, you do the action. 4, dead mouse. Roughly speaking, that's it. That's a complete action. So we're doing 1,000 of these every single day, not necessarily related to other sentient beings. And this is why the first level of practice for the Buddha is all about not harming other beings, because they're the heaviest. But the crucial point for the Buddha, and this is the point here now I have to make, or again and again remember this. The reason as a Catholic or Christian you don't kill is because God said, that's it. My priest friend said there's some aspect of natural law there, but the real factor that makes it a sin is because God told you not to do it, because God is the boss. It makes sense. But here, completely different. Our not killing, Buddha also, like Jesus, will say don't kill. But the fact that Buddha tells you not to kill doesn't make it negative because you do it, because Buddha's not a boss. He's like a doctor. In other words, your doctor will tell you not to smoke. Her reason isn't because she says so. and therefore she'll punish you with cancer if you smoke. That's our view of morality. That's not the Buddha's view of ethics at all. Buddha is like a doctor who says, Robina, honey, I found that if you kill and you steal and you lie, and these are actions that do harm others, that's what characterizes them as most negative. But, honey child, you're doing those actions will produce those fruits for you, will cause you your suffering. So the reason you don't kill is the reason in the beginning is because you don't want suffering. Eventually, it'll be motivated by compassion. Of course, it will. You'll only not kill because you don't want to harm others. But you've got to realize you don't want suffering yourself first. This is what we miss in our culture. We think that just sounds selfish. Oh, it's just for my reason. No one criticizes you for being selfish when you stop eating sugar. They call you intelligent. Well, the same with morality. You're intelligent not to kill or steal or lie because you are the recipient. Not because of morality, because you'll get punished. That's how we think, very childish. So the other three results that these actions have are these like three residual, I call them the residual results from the intensity of the killing, of the not killing, especially if you do the not killing in the framework of living in vows of not killing, which we'll talk about, and even more when you live your life with doing purification of killing at the end of every day. As Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do the purification practice every day. If you live your life in the framework of not killing, in the framework of vows and purification, then you can guarantee that next life you'll get a human body, but miraculously you'll have no thought to kill. You will not get killed or die young, and you will have a delicious environment. Whatever you touch and smell and taste will nourish you, not harm you, because they are the three residual results of not killing, and especially of living in vows of not killing. That's why you've got to live in vows. We can't get ahead of the game without living in vows, and that's what we're going to go into detail about when we have our break, after the break. We've got more. Is it more time today, or we're finished now? Hour and a half.
We'll have a lunch break, Venerable Robina, from 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time, and then we'll meet again today from 1:30 to 3 o'clock.
Okay, so I thought it was a 90-minute break. It's a 2-hour break. I don't care. I'm just double checking.
Yes, it's a 2-hour break.
So is everybody happy with a 2-hour break? Anybody want less than 2 hours, or does 2 hours suit your time zone? I'm just asking. I'm not trying to complain. If you've got any wishes, but if you're happy with 2 hours, we'll do it like a 2 hours. I don't mind at all. Not for me. I don't mind in the slightest.
2 hours is good.
Okay, good then, Mary Jo. We'll have the 2 hours, and that's it. We'll do the 2 hours then. Good. I'm very happy. So let's just do it now. It's a good time to stop, and we'll think of your questions, please, and we'll do that when we get back, and we'll go into more detail about how to live in vows and the necessity of vows, the power psychologically of vows, and of purification. We do that today and tomorrow. That'll be the essence of it. There's more to talk about, of course, but we've only got so much time. I can only talk so fast.